amazing art form. But it all happens up here, in your head. But how does this work? How do moving particles become music? Well, the answer to this question will give us amazing insight into both music and the way your brain works. Let us start with sound. What can the shape of a sound wave tell us about music? There are three important aspects that can be determined by looking at the shape of a sound wave. There are the sound's pitch, its volume, and its timbre. Now, the pitch of a sound is determined by its frequency. The higher the frequency, the higher the sound. When we take multiples of a given pitch or frequency, we get octaves. Now, an octave is a musical interval, which refers to two different notes that share the same letter name, but are either higher or lower than one another. For example, these two notes are octaves. A sound's volume is determined by the amplitude of the sound wave. Hence, a louder sound will have a larger amplitude. The third aspect that we can determine by looking at a sound wave is its timbre. The timbre of a wave is sort of its sound quality. It allows us to distinguish between, say, a piano and a trumpet, both playing the same note. We've seen how sound passes through sound waves and gets into your ear. But what happens next? Well, the first important part to notice is that you do have two ears, just like two eyes. And in the same way that you have two eyes because it gives you 3D images, you also have two ears to give you 3D sounds. But then, once the sound is registered, neurons fire at the same frequency as the sound that's entered your ears, a fact unique to music. Let's take a look at the brain. Now, this is a diagram of the brain, showing all the different brain regions involved in music. Some of these are more obvious than other ones. For example, the auditory cortex, which is involved in early processing of sounds. But we also have regions such as the motor cortex involved. The motor cortex is involved, for example, when dancing. Or say the visual cortex when you read music or watch someone perform music. Or even the sensory cortex when you feel the sensation of sound waves, for example, or feel playing an instrument. What's most interesting is that if you take, for example, the motor cortex, it's active even when you're not moving, if you're listening to music. Because music involves so many different regions of the brain, it would make sense that playing an instrument would help to activate these regions. And in fact it does. Studies have shown that playing an instrument helps to connect the left and right hemispheres of the brain to increase cognitive ability. So let's say you do decide to pick up an instrument. Well, just keep this in mind. Experts agree that it takes around 10,000 hours of practice to be considered an expert at something. Now, to put this into perspective, if you were to stop taking normal courses at school and instead focused on practicing one thing, then you would be an expert by graduation if you started in grade 4. So our next question is, where does music come from? Now, some scientists have proposed that music simply came along with language. And that music is like a sort of cheesecake. It just happens to push the right buttons to make us feel good. They also say that music doesn't really serve any purpose to humans whatsoever. However, Daniel Levitin, a prominent neuroscientist in the field of music and the brain, argues otherwise. He says that music actually came before language, because he thinks that, after all, what is music? Changes in pitch over time, which is what he thinks the first languages must have been like. This is further supported when you realize how involved language is in music. In fact, instrumental music is a fairly recent phenomenon. Before around the middle of the 18th century, instrumental music only really existed to accompany vocal music. So what makes us like the music that we like? Well, you see, we love to be surprised. So the music that we listen to needs to have a certain amount of surprise in it. That's why most of us don't really like children's music. But on the other hand, most of us find free-form jazz a bit too surprising. Now, composers do this by setting up repetition and expectations, and then either obey or defy these expectations. Now, using some interesting math created for submarine paintings, this piece of music, the ugliest piece of music ever, contains no repetition whatsoever. Let's take a look. This setting up of musical expectations happen in two specific areas of the brain. One, the hippocampus, where musical memories, and memories in general, are stored, and also in the prefrontal cortex, where the expectations are set up. So we've seen how sound waves relate to music. We've seen how your brain and the different brain regions relate to music. We've seen how playing an instrument can make you smarter, and how this can also take a very long time to master. We've seen where music comes from, and how music is related to language. And we've seen why you like the music that you like. But we've still only scratched the tip of the iceberg, and there's still so much more to discover about the art form that your brain creates, to discover more about music.